I'm Scott,
I'm Kyle.
and this is Crushing Trails and Drinking Ales. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about our training for Barkley Fall Classic and Angeles Crest 100. So, without further ado, let's just hop into it. I'll talk a little bit about kind of what our training framework looks like, and then we'll dive into a little bit more into some of the individual pieces to this. Basically, what I did was I put together a training plan based on my training for Western States 100 a couple years ago. It's pretty straightforward, pretty standard. There's a little bit of variance, but it's about a 3 to 4 week build, down week, 3 to 4 week build, down week, right? So that's kind of how it's run through to Angeles Crest 100. After AC 100, we're both actually running Barkley Fall Classic, which is 7 weeks after AC 100, which that gives us 6 weeks between the two races. So essentially, how that's structured is we'll have a basically what I'm calling almost a 100% recovery week after AC 100. We'll still be doing a little bit of running, but it's going to be very much easing into things and kind of get the legs moving and kind of working out a lot of that soreness. The second week after that will be a small build, kind of easing back into things, and then we'll do 2 solid weeks of training, probably at a low intensity, but we'll be back up for a couple weeks, and then we'll be doing 2 weeks essentially of taper, and then rolling into Barkley Fall Classic. That's kind of a very high level, quick overview of what we'll be doing. We both have a big weekend in May. We got a big weekend in June. Big weekend in July. Luckily, Kyle and I will both be in Wisconsin
It's like going into Wisconsin.
in the beginning of July, which is right when we need to be kind of hitting the peak of our training. So that right now is kind of blank slate. We got a couple ideas of what's going on, but kind of leaving that open to put in some solid miles while we're there in Wisconsin and probably offset some of the beer that we're drinking with family. That's kind of the general structure of what we're working on. Obviously, there's going to be some variance between mine and Kyle's training. I am married and have 2 kids. Kyle lives with his girlfriend and doesn't have as many constraints. It's a little bit easier sometimes for Kyle to get out and do things than it is for me, but I also travel for work. So when I'm out on the road, a lot of times I'll do my long run on a random Wednesday night so that I got family time on the weekends. So there is a little bit of tweaking to the schedules, but generally speaking, we got about the same framework. So that's not obviously not going into like, hey, we're running 5 miles on a Tuesday and this, and here's my long run on the weekend. But that's kind of the general framework for our training. Kyle, based on what you have seen and what you know and what you have in front of you from a training perspective, what are you looking forward to? What are you scared of? What are you working on? What are you concentrating on? Give us some insight on what your thoughts are on training.
This being my first 100, that really is just the biggest concern is just getting it done. AC 100 was canceled last year, so it gave me another year to build on that. But I didn't want to swap it out for a different 100 miler. Angeles Crest is, a historic event, and I would want that to be my first attempt. In order to prepare, you put the schedule together for me. So distance wise, things like that are kind of already figured out. But the real plan is to hit 2 things that I don't feel like I've done well enough, at least leading up to BFC over the last couple of years. And that is putting more attention to the vert that I'm getting, really getting out there and hitting those like, screamingly steep sort of climbs and just trying to really build up the leg strength. But in order to do that as well, the other thing is like the strength training itself. I got to be doing more. I got to be out here doing lunges, squats, planks to build up the core, mountain climbers, step ups, holding some weights because I like to pick up sticks at BFC when I'm out there. So, kind of just building up all of the strength that I'm going to need in order to get this done.
Yeah.
That's really my focus.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm doing 2 days a week of strength. Trying to do one day that's kind of just general body weight stuff, lunges, squats, push-ups, that kind of stuff, and then trying to do a second day where I'm actually doing weights. Whether it's in the garage here with some dumbbells or on the road at a hotel gym, but definitely trying to do both upper and lower body to build up that strength. It is interesting because trying to do some of the same things you are, right? Where some like crazy vert where you're just trying to push up super crazy steep stuff, because that's for Barkley Fall Classic. But I'm also trying to balance that with runnable uphills that are not as technical. Because I mean, I've never been on the AC100 course, so I could be completely wrong, but I assume that there will be some runnable uphills, and I definitely don't expect to be able to run everything uphill, but it would be nice to be able to push up some switchbacks and do some running on that. So I definitely feel you on that on the strength.
Just
Uh,
want to have those legs ready. And I mean, the only part I've seen thus far of the course is right out of Wrightwood. And I can tell you that it doesn't take too long before it goes right into some like steep stuff.
I think strength is a focus for both of us. I mean, one of my other pieces that I'm really focusing on, or one of the other things that I'm really focusing on, is nutrition. It's weird. When I was younger, I could eat anything I wanted. When I lived in New York City, I could eat a slice of pizza in the middle of a 30-mile run, and it like didn't bother me at all. And now my stomach is definitely tapping me on the shoulder when I ingest the wrong thing. Even earlier this year at Black Canyon, by mile 11, I was having stomach issues, which is crazy because it shouldn't be happening that early in a race. But I've been having a lot of stomach issues. So this training cycle, I'm really trying to dial in nutrition and hydration and make sure that that's all buttoned up going into Angeles Crest. I know that you've had some issues kind of in the past a little bit at Barkley and stuff. I know obviously a lot of this is new to you, but is that something that you're also working on as well?
Oh, absolutely. My first attempt at Barkley, around 3 hours in, I was just throwing up. I had a hard time keeping anything down. Early on in my running, I was using a lot of like the gels or goos to kind of, support me throughout the runs. And, I ended up running another 9 hours to get the marathon finish, but I still feel like I need to get that really dialed in and make sure that I'm able to, fuel myself throughout and not have to struggle through these stomach problems. So I can definitely relate on that aspect.
The other piece of that is hydration. I feel like I'm definitely not hydrating as much as I probably should during these races these days. So definitely, trying to work out, what sweat rate and that sort of stuff looks like. So really looking at electrolytes and hydration. So that's kind of one of my concentrations for this training block as well.
I mean, that's a good way to look at it. I think that might be sometimes I'm not necessarily overhydrated, but just over consuming water itself versus like the electrolytes and things with it. I think sometimes that's kind of causing my demise is just like getting like over sweating and just feeling like hot and stuff. And then once you get water access, just chugging. And that's something I need to, curtail a little bit if I'm gonna get things done without throwing up.
Stop drinking the water. Stop.
Obviously you put the training structure together for both of us, but what are you feeling? First 100 in a little while for you, and coming back for redemption at BFC about 2 years later. What do you got ahead of you? What are you afraid of? What are you looking forward to? What's going on in Scott's mind leading up to these events?
Yeah. So for me, it's a little bit different, right? I mean, I've got a lot more experience in this stuff, and maybe this is a mistake, but in my head, I'm really just looking at Angeles Crest 100, and then everything's gonna fall in place for Barkley Fall Classic, as far as I'm concerned, right? Because I feel like if I put in the training for a 100 miler with 17,000 feet of gain, with a few tweaks here and there, that I should show up on the starting line ready to finish Barkley Fall Classic, right? Assuming my legs aren't trash from AC100, which that is kind of the wild card, right? But
Yeah, are you worried about that time period?
yeah, yeah, that time period in between really does it is a little bit of a concern. But in my head, my approach is that I'm training for AC100, and then once that's done, I think I can mentally kind of reset and say, okay, it's time for Barkley Fall Classic. But having done multiple hundreds and actually, had some bad luck on hundreds, I think all of my focus needs to be on AC100. And then I don't want to say Barkley Fall Classic is an afterthought because that's a terrible way to look at it, especially since I know I've been there and I know how hard that race is. But I feel like if I put in the work for AC100, I'm going to be okay for Barkley Fall Classic. So really
Yeah, the fitness level's not going to fall off in that. I mean, I know obviously the legs are going to be tired after that, but there should be enough time for us
yeah,
to.
really what I'm doing is, in my head, I'm concentrating on AC100, and then I'll worry about Barkley Fall Classic once I'm through AC100. So I've got 300-mile finishes. Unfortunately or fortunately, I know what it takes to get it done, but I also know what you got to go through to get it done. So sometimes ignorance is bliss. So maybe there might be some times where it's actually you have an easier time than I do because I know I know what I'm getting myself
It's
into.
better going in blind
Yeah.
almost, and not to jump ahead, but I kind of felt that way with BFC. Like now that I know what can occur out there, like it was better to not know.
That that race and that part of the world has some interesting weather and interesting conditions. So who knows?
Yeah, you think you're prepared for something, and it ends up not being anything like you thought. Especially if we get caught in some rain, like you dealt with the year you ran it in 2021, and then I dealt with it last year in 2023. So no rain. Hopefully, we can put that out there.
And I start to complain that there's no rain.
I've had a lot of bad luck on the hundreds in recent years. So, going back a little bit, I attempted Mohican 100 a few years back and DNF that due to a comedy of errors, including raccoons eating my my drop bag, which is
Those trash
interesting.
pandas will go after anything.
That was not the only thing that went wrong that day, but that was definitely the most memorable thing that went wrong that day. So, I ended up DNFing that at like mile 77. That was my first DNF at the 100-mile distance. I had bad luck there. I did get a little bit of redemption and got my second finish at Arkansas Traveler that same year. Then the following year, I ended up DNFing San Diego 100 at about mile 50. I don't need to go into it, but I was having a lot of issues. I actually ran myself into what was probably rhabdo at the Grand Canyon about 6 weeks prior, and some of that stuff was flaring back up, and I decided that it was smarter to drop than to do permanent damage to myself. So,
Live to
uh,
fight another day, and
yeah,
come back
yeah.
for another one. Now you're able to run AC 100.
Year before last, I actually finally got into Western States 100 and had some issues going into that, and then got on the course and turned out that I actually had COVID. My heart rate was screaming the entire time, and I couldn't breathe, and ended up getting timed out at about 10 and a half hours into that race, which devastated me. But
Oh
essentially,
man, I will say we were actually Katie and I and your girls were at the aid station that you would have been coming into next. So it was heartbreaking for us too, like watching as the time was ticking down.
unfortunately, DNF to Western States, and so out of my last 400-mile attempts, I've had 3 DNFs. So yeah, I've had multiple ultra finishes in that same time span. I really feel like I need to get across the finish line of a 100-miler. Who knows what could happen? Maybe I break my leg or whatever. But I mean, I'm gonna crawl across the finish line at Angeles Crest 100. I want to get that finish. So, you
We
know,
will be there doing it together.
yeah.
In my mind, I'm a lot like more accomplished than I really am. So we're gonna be crawling through at the end if it takes us.
AC100 is not an easy race, but I'm going to do everything in my power to get across the finish line because I just need to get this monkey off my back, get the 100-mile finish, and then figure out where things go from there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously, it's interesting. Your ignorance is bliss versus the guy who has more experience at this distance. So it'll be interesting on race day. The 100 is, for whatever reason,
Been
haunting.
elusive. It's been fighting back.
It's been haunting me a little bit. So, that's the big thing is I just want to get the finish. I don't care if it's 32 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds because there was a 33-hour cutoff for Angeles Crest, but I don't care. I just want to get across the finish line and can say, hey, I got another 100-mile finish. I know you're close enough to the course that you can kind of get out there occasionally and actually check out the course at AC100. We've both been on the Barkley Fall Classic course. I mean, it changes from year to year, but there's kind of nothing we can do there except show up and hope we have a good day. But as far as training for AC100 and then Barkley as well, what do you have in mind for specific workouts or routes to kind of maximize vert or speed, or what does that look like for you?
Obviously, I'd love to get out and run the Barkley challenge loop that's out there and just kind of see it in a different light than on race day. But yeah, I'm close to Angeles Crest 100, essentially my backyard. I'm in Playa del Rey, so it's about an hour or so to get to Pasadena, depending on the traffic. But I have the opportunity to at least get out, see Baden Powell with the switchbacks, maybe get some time near Mount Wilson where it's going to come through, but it's not necessarily close. So, in terms of places near me, Los Leones in the Santa Monica Mountains has a segment on Strava called Up the Rabbit Hole, which is essentially around 1,500 feet of gain in a little over a mile, somewhere around that. In terms of like, the steady up, that's the one I'm going to plan on hitting a lot. And then I like the Culver Stairs, Kenneth Hahn area. There's some good grind up the bat. Either if I take the stairs and just go up or take the path. And then there's a lot of more runnable areas over there as well. So kind of work the legs and then hit those flatter areas to make sure I'm not redlining after all the climbs. But that's what I got out here in California. Luckily to be kind of near some mountains. What are you thinking over there in Texas where it's a little less mountainous? How are you going to get your gain?
I mean, I'm in Central Texas, so not far from the hill country. So we do have some decent vert, but none of it's extended climbs, right? In my immediate vicinity, like I can get a half mile or so of vertical gain. I've got a hill less than a half mile from us that is about 0.42 miles and about a little over 80 feet of gain. So, it's a decent little climb, but it's not obviously not extended. So I've done a bunch of repeats on that if I need to. It definitely helps. It pays off. I mean, it's better than running flat, but what I really try to take advantage of is when I go out to El Paso for work because I'm right there by the Franklin Mountains. The longest climb I can get in is about 6.5 miles with 3,000 feet of gain. So that's a pretty solid run.
It's a nice push, and that was the one you've talked about possibly doing the double on.
The double would basically be a marathon. I've attempted it before, but it's a little tough because there's no water out there, so you got to carry a lot of water on you. It's a good climb. I mean, one time up and one time down is about a half marathon. It definitely gets harder as you go up. It's very technical, and once you get up toward the top, there's some 25-30% grade incline, so it's tough. So I try to maximize my time out in El Paso. Cloudcroft is at about 9,000 feet. It's about 2 hours from El Paso. So if things work out, I can head up there after work in the summer, get in a pretty decent run, and then be back in El Paso by 10, 11 o'clock at night and be able to work the next day. So, I try to really take advantage of that time when I'm out there, especially since if I put in time out there, that lessens the time that I need to devote to training on the weekends and maximizes the time that I can spend with family. So that's kind of the goal when I go out that way.
Take advantage of what you can, what you have available for you. It sounds like both of us have an idea of what we need to do in order to accomplish these two big goals that we have set up for us. If anyone wants to follow along, we do monthly updates. You can keep an eye out and see how the progress is going leading up to both AC100 and Barkley Fall Classic. If you happen to be running either event, want some advice on training, have any advice for us, or just want to get together for a run, we'd love to hear from you. We want to get together and crush trails and drink ales with people. But until we see you guys again, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.